The first rays of sunlight stretched across the vast Air Force base, painting the runway in hues of amber and gold. The desert air was cool, crisp, and still, disturbed only by the distant hum of generators and the occasional crackle of radios. Rows of fighter jets sat in silence like metallic predators, each one a marvel of engineering, waiting for the day's missions. Among them, the F-22 Raptor gleamed faintly under the rising sun, its angular shape absorbing and deflecting light, in ways that made it look more like a creature than a machine. Captain Ryan Mitchell, a pilot with over a decade of experience, walked toward his assigned aircraft with a calm focus. He carried his helmet in one hand, flight documents tucked under his arm, and the weight of responsibility settled comfortably across his shoulders. To him, this morning was routine. A training sortie, high-altitude maneuvers, nothing extraordinary. Yet beneath the calm repetition of his day, the Air Force culture whispered a truth every pilot knew. No flight was ever truly routine. The crew chief saluted as Ryan approached. "Morning, Captain. She's fueled, checked, and ready for you." Ryan returned the salute and glanced over the Raptor, his eyes scanning every surface with the intimate familiarity of someone who knew the aircraft like a second skin. He ran his hand along the smooth edge of the wing, almost like greeting an old friend. Pilots often described the F-22 as alive, temperamental even, a machine that responded best to respect. Ryan believed that. He respected the jet the way a soldier respects a rifle, never as an object, always as a partner. Inside the hangar, mechanics wiped grease from their hands and double-checked maintenance logs. The smell of jet fuel and oil clung to the air. Ryan climbed the ladder into the cockpit, lowering himself into the seat that had carried him through countless missions. As he strapped in, he performed his ritual. Hands running across each control, switches flicked, gauges read, systems initialized. Every step was deliberate, memorized. Nothing was rushed. The control tower came alive over his headset. "Raptor 1, this is Tower. Radio check." Ryan pressed his comm switch. "Tower, this is Raptor 1. Loud and clear." The exchange was standard, but the voices carried layers of trust. Pilots depended on those unseen men and women in the tower, their calm instructions often the thin line between order and chaos. Ryan had never needed that lifeline in any serious way, but he knew the day could come. Outside, the sun crept higher, burning away the morning haze. Heat shimmered off the tarmac as the jet's twin engines roared to life. Ground crew backed away, their hands raised in signals of readiness. Ryan adjusted his helmet, lowered the visor, and felt the familiar vibration as the Raptor pulsed with energy. It was no longer dormant. It was awake, alive, waiting for him to command it. Raptor 1, cleared for taxi. Ryan guided the jet along the runway, wheels rolling with authority. Other aircraft sat idle, watching like sentinels. As he lined up for takeoff, he thought briefly of the thousands of people who lived beyond the base perimeter, families in suburbs, children on their way to school, ordinary lives unfolding under the same morning sky. He never let himself forget. Each flight carried risks not only for him, but for everyone under his path. The tower's final clearance echoed in his headset. "Raptor 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Godspeed." With a deep breath, Ryan pushed the throttle forward. The engine screamed, pressing him back into the seat as the Raptor surged down the runway. In seconds, the wheels left the ground, and the jet climbed like an arrow, piercing the heavens. The earth fell away, the base shrinking beneath him, and the sky opened wide. At 10,000 feet, Ryan leveled off, his hands steady on the controls. The flight plan called for maneuvers at higher altitudes, simulated combat scenarios and systems. Checks, nothing unusual. But even as the flight settled into routine, Ryan remained sharp. Pilots were trained to expect the unexpected, to treat every second in the air as a test of discipline. Back in the tower, controllers tracked his ascent on radar. Their screens showed his altitude, speed, and trajectory in glowing green lines. Each dot represented more than numbers. It was a life, a machine worth millions, and the reputation of the Air Force itself. Among them, Senior Controller Mark Harris watched closely. He had been on the job for years, guiding pilots through storms, emergencies, and near misses. Most days were uneventful, but he had learned to never let his guard down. Ryan executed his first set of maneuvers, the Raptor rolling effortlessly through the sky. The jet responded like an extension of his body, a dance of steel and instinct. He smiled beneath his visor, adrenaline mixing with calm focus. To an outsider, it might have seemed glamorous soaring at impossible speeds, commanding the most advanced fighter in the world. But to Ryan, it was work. Dangerous work, yes, but also deeply personal. As the minutes passed, the morning sun fully claimed the sky. The base below bustled with activity, yet Ryan was in a world of his own alone, suspended between heaven and earth, tethered only by the voice of the tower. 10 minutes. 10 minutes before the first warning light would flicker. 10 minutes before his training, his trust, and his very survival would be tested in ways he had never imagined. But for now, in that golden morning, it was just a man. His machine flying, alive and unaware of how quickly the ordinary could collapse into chaos. The runway stretched endlessly before the Raptor, shimmering under the now fully risen sun. Heat waves rippled across the asphalt, but inside the cockpit, Captain Ryan Mitchell's world narrowed to the vibrating hum of the engines and the checklist, etched into his mind. He had performed this sequence countless times, but ritual never dulled its gravity. His gloved hand rested firmly on the throttle. This was the moment every pilot felt, the brief heartbeat between earth and sky, between safety and risk. The tower's voice came steady through the comms. Raptor 1, cleared for departure. Winds calm, runway 31 right. You're good to go. Ryan inhaled, filling his lungs with the recycled, oxygen-rich air of his flight system. His voice was cool, professional. Tower, Raptor 1 rolling. He eased the throttle forward. The twin Pratt and Whitney F-119 engines responded instantly, unleashing a roar that reverberated across the airfield. Dust and debris scattered in the jet's wake as the F-22 surged down the runway. The acceleration pinned Ryan into his seat. The speedometer climbed, the vibration smoothed, and the nose lifted gracefully from the earth. The base below shrank rapidly as the Raptor clawed upward. Ryan felt the familiar lightness of transition, that moment when gravity seemed to loosen its grip, leaving him suspended between worlds. At 15,000 feet, the sky expanded into an infinite canvas of blue. The ground blurred into a patchwork of fields and highways. Inside the tower, Senior Controller Mark Harris followed the radar feed, his sharp eyes fixed on the green blip representing Raptor 1. Climb confirmed. Speed nominal. Altitude nominal. His voice carried no excitement, no relief. It was the composure of a man who had seen thousands of takeoffs. Still, somewhere beneath the discipline, he held a quiet admiration. Watching an F-22 take to the skies never failed to stir something in him. Ryan began his standard maneuvers. The Raptor banked left, slicing through the air with precision, then rolled into a climbing turn. The cockpit vibrated subtly, but to him, it was smooth as silk. He adjusted trim, monitored systems, and ran through checks. Each maneuver was calculated, deliberate, part of a ballet only pilot and jet could perform. He spoke into his mic, his tone steady. Tower Raptor 1 commencing standard patterns. Systems green. The tower responded. Copy that, Raptor? 1. Maintain altitude flight level 200 and proceed with exercises. Ryan guided the aircraft into a high G roll, pressing his body hard into the seat. Blood drained toward his legs, but training kept him sharp. He performed the anti-G straining maneuver, muscles tensing, breathing timed, keeping his vision clear. The jet responded flawlessly, as though reading his intent before his hands completed the motion. On the ground, crews watched the contrails streak across the sky. To them, it was another day at work, but there was always awe in seeing the Raptor carve invisible lines against the horizon. Families outside the base sometimes paused to watch, children pointing skyward, unaware of the danger always shadowing. These displays, at 20,000 feet, Ryan leveled the jet, the sky above growing darker, a hint of the stratosphere's endless black. He adjusted his throttle, feeling the subtle feedback through the controls. He thought of his early training days. Flying smaller, older jets that lacked the finesse of the Raptor. Those aircraft had demanded muscle. The F-22 demanded precision. It wasn't brute strength that tamed this machine. It was finesse, timing, and trust. Routine checks continued. Fuel levels stable. Engine performance nominal. Avionics aligned. Ryan reported each back to the tower in clipped phrases. The exchange between air and ground was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. It lulled him into focus, but also kept him grounded. Up here, suspended in silence, it was easy to forget there were others watching, guiding, protecting. The maneuvers grew more complex. Ryan initiated a vertical climb, pushing the Raptor's nose upward into a steep ascent. The engines thundered, pressing him into the seat as the jet climbed like a rocket. At the apex, he cut power, flipping the nose into a controlled stall turn, dropping back through the air before catching himself in a recovery arc. His instruments blinked with precision. His body moved with instinct. Raptor 1, you're clean, the tower confirmed. Ryan smiled faintly under his visor. It wasn't joy. It was the satisfaction of harmony between man and machine. For a moment, the world was nothing but sky. The cockpit's canopy gave him an unobstructed view of infinity, the curvature of Earth faint along the horizon. He thought briefly of the men and women on the ground, living ordinary lives, unaware of the razor's edge pilots danced upon daily. Up here, the margin for error was thinner than a breath. The clock ticked. 20 minutes into the flight, everything remained flawless. Ryan cycled through another set of patterns, tracing invisible figures in the air. His breathing was calm, his movements efficient. The checklist was complete, the jet responsive, routine, safe, controlled, and yet, beneath the surface, something subtle had begun to shift. It was almost imperceptible, a tiny fluctuation in fuel pressure, a needle twitching for less than a second before returning to normal. Ryan glanced at it, registered it, but dismissed it as a minor blip. Such anomalies happened. Nothing in the aircraft's performance suggested danger. In the tower, Mark Harris's radar showed the Raptor maintaining course perfectly. But his eyes, trained over decades, noticed a tiny wobble in the flight path. Barely noticeable, the kind of detail only a veteran would even consider. He leaned closer, adjusting his headset. Raptor 1, confirm fuel system nominal? Ryan glanced again at the gauge. Everything looked stable. Tower, fuel system steady. All green. Copy, Mark replied, though he marked the anomaly on his notepad. It was his habit to track the small things before they grew big. The maneuvers continued, the Raptor slicing clean arcs through the sky. But the moment had passed. Somewhere in the machine, a problem was growing quietly, invisible to the naked eye. Ryan's hands never wavered, his focus absolute. For him, this was still a routine flight, a morning like countless others. He couldn't yet know that the twitch on his gauge and the wobble on the radar were the first whispers of something far greater. 10 minutes. That was all it would take. 10 minutes before alarms screamed in his cockpit. 10 minutes before the steady rhythm between pilot and tower shifted from routine to survival. But for now, Ryan Mitchell flew through the calm morning sky, believing the day was ordinary. And on the ground, Mark Harris watched closely, sensing, though he could not explain, that the flight was far from over. At 22,000 feet, the sky was a deep sapphire, the air thinner and sharper. Captain Ryan Mitchell sat steady in the cockpit, every movement precise, his breathing slow. The Raptor had carried him flawlessly through a series of maneuvers, each more demanding than the last. The hum of the engines was a song of power and control, one he had grown accustomed to, one he trusted. But trust in machines is fragile. It can shatter in an instant. The first sign was small, almost insignificant. A fuel pressure gauge flickered, the needle dipping below its normal range before snapping back. Ryan's eyes caught it, registering the anomaly in less than a second. Pilots were trained to notice everything, and though the needle corrected itself quickly, it left a trace of unease. He pressed the COM switch. Tower, this is Raptor 1. I'm seeing a minor fluctuation in fuel pressure. System corrected. Itself, continuing normal operations. In the control tower, Senior Controller Mark Harris leaned forward in his chair. He made a quick note in his logbook, circling the time. His experience had taught him that small things mattered. Copy that, Raptor 1. Keep an eye on it. You're still showing nominal on our end. Ryan acknowledged, his voice calm. Roger, Tower. Systems green. He wanted to believe it was nothing. A sensor glitch, perhaps, or a minor hiccup. Aircraft of this complexity were prone to such things. The Raptor was a marvel, but it wasn't infallible. He continued with his maneuvers. A wide bank to the right, a climb to 25,000 feet, a descent into a simulated engagement pattern. The jet moved cleanly, responding to his every command. Yet twice more, the gauge twitched. Not long enough to raise alarms, but long enough for Ryan's instincts to stir. Inside the cockpit, he shifted slightly, adjusting his harness. He wasn't nervous not yet, but his awareness sharpened. It was the same sensation soldiers felt on patrol, when the silence of the desert seemed too still, too perfect. A prickle on the back of the neck, a whisper of caution that could not be ignored. Mark Harris noticed something too. On his radar screen, the Raptor's flight path looked impeccable to the untrained eye. But to him, the line wasn't as clean as it should be. A subtle drift, almost imperceptible, like a pencil line drawn with a hand that trembled only slightly. It wasn't error, it was imbalance. He keyed the mic. Raptor 1, Tower. Confirm you're handling everything feeling normal? Ryan glanced at his controls. Affirmative, Tower. Controls feel good. Jet's responsive. He paused. Fuel pressure flickered again, just for a second. No warnings. Systems back to green. Mark scribbled another note, his brow furrowing. He had guided aircraft through engine failures, hydraulic losses, even mid-air refueling mishaps. He knew the early signs. This was one of them. Copy, Raptor 1. Stay alert. Let us know if anything changes. His tone was steady, but in his chest he felt the first stirrings of concern. Ryan nodded silently, though no one could see him. He tapped the fuel gauge lightly with his finger, an old pilot's habit, as if the touch could reveal the truth. The needle held steady. Still, his gut tightened. He pushed the Raptor into another maneuver, a sharp dive followed by a climb. The engines roared, the cockpit vibrated, and the world outside blurred in streaks of blue and white. The jet responded beautifully, but the gauge flickered again. This time, a warning light blinked red for half a second before vanishing. Ryan's breath caught. He checked the systems panel, flipping switches, running diagnostics. No fault reported. No active alarms. To the jet's brain, everything was fine. But Ryan had flown long enough to know machines sometimes lied. Tower, Raptor 1. Brief warning light on fuel system. It cleared itself. Rerunning checks. Mark's hand froze. Over his console. He glanced at the radar, then at his fellow controllers. They looked back, concern mirrored in their eyes. He pressed the COM switch. Raptor 1 tower, we've got you stable on radar. Recommend holding at current altitude and minimizing aggressive maneuvers until we assess further. Ryan hesitated, then complied. Copy that, tower. Holding steady at 24,000 feet. The cockpit was quieter now, the jet cruising smoothly, but tension coiled in the silence. Ryan's eyes scanned every gauge, every dial, waiting for the next flicker. His heartbeat was steady, but he felt the weight of possibility pressing on him. Pilots were taught to plan 3 steps ahead. What if this was real? What if the system failed completely? What if he had to eject? He thought of the ground below fields, neighborhoods, highways. Ejecting wasn't just about him. If the jet went down uncontrolled, lives on the ground were at risk. The thought lingered, heavy and sobering. Mark Harris knew it too. From his vantage point, he wasn't just protecting Ryan. He was protecting everyone beneath the Raptor's path. He kept his voice calm, knowing that panic served no one. Raptor 1, tower. Confirm oxygen flow and hydraulics. Any other anomalies? Ryan checked. Oxygen steady. Hydraulics normal. Only the fuel readings. Intermittent. Understood. Mark leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. His instincts screamed that this wasn't over. Minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. The gauge remained steady, as though mocking Ryan's earlier concern. Perhaps it was over, just a glitch. Perhaps he'd land safely, shake his head, and laugh at the paranoia. But experience told him otherwise. Problems that came in whispers often ended in screams. At 24,000 feet, he scanned the horizon. The sky stretched endless, calm, and deceptive. Below, the land seemed peaceful. And yet, inside the cockpit, a storm was building, silent and unseen. Another flicker, another red blink. This time, it lingered longer. Ryan's jaw tightened. He keyed his mic. Tower, Raptor 1. Fuel warning again. Longer this time. Still. Self-corrected. No system shutdowns. But I don't like it. Mark's reply came without hesitation, his voice calm, but edged with urgency. Copy, Raptor 1. Stay with me. We're watching you close. The line crackled, the connection alive with unspoken tension. Pilot and controller both knew the truth now. The flight was no longer routine. Something was wrong, and it was only a matter of time before it revealed itself fully. 10 minutes. That was the window between anomaly and disaster. 10 minutes before alarm screamed, before choices narrowed to survival. And as Ryan tightened his grip on the controls, he understood. The morning calm was gone. The day had shifted, and he was now flying on the edge of uncertainty, guided only by instinct and the steady voice that watched from the ground. From the wide glass windows of the control tower, the horizon looked deceptively calm. The sun had climbed higher, painting the sky in a pale blue that stretched endlessly. To anyone outside, it was the kind of day made for flying clear skies, steady winds, and perfect visibility. But inside the tower, the atmosphere was tense. Senior Controller Mark Harris leaned forward in his chair, elbows pressing into the console, eyes fixed on the glowing green blip that represented Raptor 1. His headset crackled faintly, the sound of silence between transmissions heavier than words. He had worked countless flights, guided hundreds of pilots through missions, But his instincts were rarely wrong. Something was brewing up there. The logs in front of him showed everything as normal. Altitude, steady at 24,000 feet. Airspeed, within parameters. Course, locked. To a computer, the flight was flawless. But Mark didn't just read numbers, he read patterns. And the Raptor's pattern wasn't right. The movements were precise, but carried a faint wobble, like a tightrope walker, adjusting more often than necessary. Subtle, easily dismissed, but not by him. Raptor 1 tower, Mark called, his voice even. Confirm flight stability. We're seeing slight deviations on our end. The reply came quickly, calm but tight. Tower, Raptor 1. Controls still responsive. Fuel pressures flickered again. No active warnings at the moment. Mark scribbled another note in his log. His hand pressed harder this time, circling. The time. His gut told him what his eyes couldn't yet prove. The jet was fighting something unseen. He glanced around the tower. Beside him, younger controllers monitored civilian air traffic, logged clearances, and scanned radar screens. None of them showed the same intensity he did. For them, it was just another morning shift. But Mark's decades in the chair had carved a sixth sense into him. He knew that accidents rarely began with explosions. They began with whispers. And he was hearing them now. Copy, Raptor 1, Mark said, forcing calm into his tone. Pilots read voices as much as words, and he couldn't. Let Ryan hear the concern he felt. I want you to stay steady on this heading. No aggressive maneuvers until we clear this. Understood, Ryan replied. Mark muted his mic and exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. He could picture the pilot strapped into that cockpit, adrenaline surging, instincts on high alert. He had guided men through worse engine failures, landing gear collapses, even one pilot who'd lost consciousness mid-flight. But the F-22 was different. It was a beast of advanced systems, layers of electronics, hydraulics, and sensors. When something went wrong, it often went wrong fast. A younger controller leaned over. Everything looks stable on the screen, sir. You think it's serious? Mark kept his eyes on the radar. It's not about what's on the screens. It's about what's between them. He tapped the glowing line that traced Raptor 1's flight path. That wobble isn't there without a reason. He unmuted his mic. Raptor 1 tower, run me through your panel again. Any changes on hydraulics, oxygen, avionics? Ryan's voice came steady. Hydraulics normal. Oxygen flow good. Avionics green. Only the fuel pressure still intermittent. No lockouts yet. Mark closed his eyes for half a second, listening not just to the words, but to the tone. Ryan was calm, but there was a hesitation in the way he spoke about the warning. It wasn't fear. It was intuition. The pilot felt the same thing he did. The problem was real, and it was growing. The radio crackled again. Tower, Raptor 1. Minor vibration in the stick on descent. Controls still responsive, but not as smooth. Mark's pulse ticked up. He straightened in his chair, voice calm but firm. Copy that, Raptor 1. We're tracking closely. Keep your descent minimal and hold current altitude. He scribbled furiously in his log. Stick vibration. Fuel anomaly. Possible hydraulic. Bleed? Electrical interference? He couldn't know yet, but he knew one truth pilots didn't imagine things like that. Down below, on the tarmac, other aircraft taxied, engines rumbling, crews moving with purpose. Life on the base continued, ordinary and unaware of the storm quietly unfolding in the sky above. Only those inside the tower, and one man strapped inside a cockpit, knew the fragile thread of control was beginning to fray. Mark leaned into his mic again, lowering his voice as if speaking directly to Ryan, man to man. Raptor 1, I want you to trust me on this. We're going to keep it simple. No hard pulls, no unnecessary inputs. Conserve fuel, stabilize flight. I'm right here with you. There was a pause, then Ryan replied, Copy, Tower, staying with you. It was a small exchange, but Mark felt the weight of it. In that moment, he wasn't just a controller on the ground. He was the lifeline. Pilots were trained to trust instruments, but when those failed, or when they lied, it was often the steady voice in the headset that kept them alive. The minutes dragged. Each tick of the clock felt stretched, amplified by the silence of a lay. Jet holding its breath. Mark's eyes scanned between screens, logs, and Ryan's flight path. The wobble was more pronounced now. Slight dips in altitude that corrected quickly, but too frequently to ignore. Raptor 1, Tower, I'm seeing some fluctuation in your altitude. Confirm controls still responsive? Affirmative, Ryan. Answered. Controls responding, but there's resistance. Feels sluggish. Mark's hand tightened around his pen. Sluggish controls were no small matter. If hydraulics were failing, time was running out. He forced calm into his voice. Copy, Raptor 1. Stay steady. We're with you. He glanced at the emergency checklist on his console, though he knew most of it by heart. He also knew that checklists didn't always save pilots, people did. His job wasn't just to follow procedure. It was to read the situation, to bridge the gap between numbers and survival. Raptor 1, Mark called again. Describe the resistance. Constant or intermittent? Ryan took a moment. Intermittent. Comes in waves. Throttle feels normal. Stick heavy at times, then clears. Mark nodded to himself. Not hydraulics, then not yet. Something deeper. Systems talking to each other, misfiring, confusing commands. It was like watching a healthy man stumble, no collapse yet, but the stumble was the warning. He leaned back in his chair for a moment, gazing out the tower's glass. The sky looked beautiful, serene. No one down there knew how fragile that beauty was. One wrong sequence, one system failure, and serenity could become fire and wreckage in seconds. Mark returned to the mic. His voice was steady, the anchor Ryan needed. Stay with me, Raptor 1. We've got eyes on you. You're not alone up there. The cockpit crackled back. Ryan's reply was calm, but softer now, edged with something human. Copy that, Tower. Appreciate you. It was a small acknowledgement, but Mark felt it deep. The bond between air and ground wasn't written in manuals. It was earned in moments like these. A pilot, alone in a fragile metal shell at 24,000 feet, trusted the man he couldn't see but could hear. And Mark, surrounded by screens and numbers, trusted the man he couldn't touch but could guide. The anomalies weren't catastrophic yet, but they were building. Mark knew they had entered a new phase. It was no longer a routine flight. It was the beginning of a fight for control and survival. And as he stared at the radar, heart steady but mind racing, Mark Harris made a silent vow. As long as that pilot's voice came through the headset, he would not let him fall. The cockpit erupted in sound. It began with a single sharp chime, an alert Ryan had heard before in simulations, one that always set nerves on edge. Then another. Then another. The cockpit, once a place of control and rhythm, transformed into a storm of flashing lights and piercing tones. Warnings cascaded across the heads-up display, fuel system anomalies climbing from whispers into shouts. Ryan's heart thumped against his rib cage, but his breathing stayed measured. This was the crucible every pilot trained for, when routine fractured into chaos, when instinct and training had to merge. Tower, Raptor 1, he reported quickly, forcing his voice to remain level. Fuel warning active, stick resistance increasing. Multiple alerts in cockpit. Still maintaining altitude, but response is degraded. The reply came at once. Raptor 1, Tower, we've got you. Stay with me. Keep it steady. The calm tone of Senior Controller Mark Harris cut through the storm. Ryan latched onto that voice like a lifeline. But even so, the decision weighed on him. Was this the moment to eject? His training screamed that survival was priority, but his mind ran through the consequences. He was flying over farmland, near a stretch of highway. If the jet went down, uncontrolled, people on the ground could die. His fingers tightened on the control stick. Not yet. Not unless he had no choice. The alarms persisted, their shrill cadence clawing at his composure. Ryan fought to compartmentalize, identify, prioritize, act. That was the mantra. He scanned the gauges again, fuel pressure dipping erratically, flow valves cycling unpredictably. The engines roared one moment, then coughed slightly, as though struggling against themselves. The stick jerked in his hand, the aircraft lurching left. Ryan corrected instantly, muscles straining as he pulled it back. Sweat pooled beneath his gloves, but his grip didn't falter. The jet felt heavier now, its once graceful responses sluggish. Uncooperative. Flying it was no longer a dance, it was a wrestling match. Tower, Raptor 1. I've got significant resistance. Jet not holding straight. Correcting manually. Mark's voice filled his ears. Copy, Raptor 1. Ease your inputs. Don't fight it head on. Give me small corrections. Ryan obeyed, reducing his inputs, coaxing the Raptor rather than forcing it. The jet responded, stabilizing slightly. Relief brushed him, but it was fleeting. Another warning lit up Hid-C's caution. Hydraulics. His stomach tightened. Without hydraulics, flight control surfaces could lock or lag unpredictably. The stick vibrated under his hand, feedback telling him the system was straining. A choice loomed. Continue wrestling the jet, or prepare to abandon it. But ejecting meant failure. It meant a fireball on the ground, wreckage strewn, across fields, perhaps houses. And in his chest, a voice whispered, Not yet. You can still save this. Mark's voice returned, deliberate and grounding. Raptor 1, listen to me. You're still in control. Hydraulics are giving you pushback, but you've got response. Keep altitude. Don't dive. Stay level. Copy, Tower, Ryan answered, his jaw tight, the strain built. His arms ached as he fought the stick. Each correction a test of endurance. The alarms continued, relentless. In training, simulators recreated these emergencies, but nothing compared to reality. The sweat in his gloves, the tremor in his muscles, the pounding in his ears, all were brutally human. He caught sight of the altimeter. The jet was bleeding. Altitude slowly, dropping despite his corrections. Not fast, but steady. Tower, Raptor 1, losing altitude. Minor, but consistent. Inputs correcting only partially. Mark's reply was immediate. Copy. Keep throttle steady. Do not overcorrect. Let's work through this. Ryan forced himself to breathe slower, his chest rising and falling in measured rhythm. Panic narrowed vision. Calm kept it wide. He couldn't afford tunnel vision. No. Still, the thought of ejecting clawed at him. He pictured pulling the handles, the explosive jolt, the canopy shattering, the violent rush of air. Then drifting, suspended by parachute, watching the machine spiral into destruction below. He had seen that before friends saved, jets lost. But this was different. This was a Raptor, a symbol of dominance and defense. And beneath it lay lives that had never signed up for risk. Not yet, he muttered under his breath. Not yet. The cockpit rattled again, a stick pulling sharply right. He fought it, muscles burning. The horizon tilted dangerously before he stabilized it. His breathing quickened despite himself, and he could feel fatigue creeping in. Every correction drained him. Every second stretched like an eternity. Raptor 1 tower, Mark said, his voice sharper now. Talk to me. What's the jet giving you? Ryan gritted his teeth. Throttle steady. Hydraulics intermittent. Stick heavy. Altitude dropping 200 feet in the last minute. Still correcting, but she's fighting me. Understood, Mark said. There was a pause, and his voice lowered, firm but calm. Listen to me, Ryan. You are not alone up there. Don't let the jet control you. Keep your focus. Trust your training. Trust me. The words steadied him more than any system check. He wasn't just wrestling a failing machine. He was connected to another human being who understood the stakes, who would not let him slip into isolation. Ryan's body screamed under the strain, but his mind sharpened. He shifted his grip, loosening slightly, coaxing again instead of forcing. The Raptor responded with grudging compliance. Not smooth, not easy, but enough. Seconds dragged. The alarms droned. The fatigue deepened. And still he fought. The line between pilot and machine blurred. He wasn't just flying anymore. He was holding on, clinging, refusing to surrender. The cockpit was chaos, but inside himself, he found the thread of control, woven with training, instinct, and the steady rhythm of Mark's voice in his ear. And yet, in the back of his mind, the truth lingered. This couldn't last forever. Systems were failing. The jet was slipping, piece by piece. If he couldn't find another way, the moment of ejection was coming. But until then, until the last possible second, Captain Ryan Mitchell would fight. Not just for his own life, but for the lives beneath his wings, for the machine entrusted to him, and for the voice on the ground that refused to let him give up. The tower was hushed. Every controller inside the glass-walled room could feel it, the weight of one pilot's struggle hanging over them like a storm cloud. The air traffic chatter, normally constant and overlapping, had grown sparse. Mark. Harris sat at the center, shoulders squared, eyes locked on Raptor 1's signal, as if his gaze alone could hold the jet steady. Raptor 1 tower, he said into the headset, his voice deliberate, steady, like a rope thrown across a raging river. We're going to work this problem together. Do you hear me? The cockpit crackled back. Ryan's reply was taut, his breath audible between words. Copy, tower. Still in the fight. Systems degrading. Holding for now. Mark leaned forward, jotting quick notes on his log. Hydraulics intermittent. Fuel unstable. Altitude drop. It was a grim combination. But he refused to let the math write the ending. Numbers didn't save lives, decisions did. Listen to me, Ryan, Mark said, his tone softening but firm. I want you to loosen your grip on the stick. Don't wrestle her. Coax her. The Raptor's designed to follow micro-corrections. Give her small adjustments. Trying, Ryan answered. His voice strained with effort. Stick's heavy. She wants to roll. Mark's brow furrowed. He pictured the cockpit, the glow of alerts, the vibration of the stick, Ryan's gloved hands trembling under fatigue. He'd guided pilots through chaos before, but never once strapped into an F-22 dancing on the edge of control. Okay, Mark said slowly, his voice lowering to near whisper. We're not thinking about 10 minutes from now. We're not thinking about landing yet. We're thinking about the next 60 seconds. Can you hold steady for 1 minute? There was a pause, and Ryan's voice returned, clipped but resolute. I can hold. Mark smiled faintly, though his chest was tight. That's all we need right now. 1 minute at a time. The tower's younger controllers watched silently. They saw Mark's focus, the way his tone never wavered, and they understood they were witnessing something beyond protocol. This wasn't just air traffic control, it was human connection, forged under fire. Mark pressed his mic again. Raptor 1, confirmed throttle. Throttle steady, power stable. Good. Keep it there. Don't chase the altitude drop yet. Let's stabilize the roll first. Ryan exhaled audibly through the radio. He was still fighting, but the rhythm of Mark's voice cut through the alarms, giving him something constant to anchor to. Each instruction pulled him back from the edge of panic, reminding him he wasn't fighting alone. Another warning chimed in Ryan's cockpit, a harsh hydraulic alert flashing red. The stick pulled again, jerking right. He gritted his teeth, muscles burning as he corrected. Tower, Raptor 1, losing her again. Right roll increasing. Mark's voice came instantly, sharp but calm. Ease it, Ryan. Don't yank. Left pressure, slow, deliberate. Think smooth, not force. Ryan obeyed, coaxing instead of pulling. The jet resisted, then reluctantly leveled. His chest heaved as though he'd just lifted a mountain. That's it, Mark said, his tone lightening just slightly. You've got her. You're still the one flying this bird, not the other way around. Ryan managed a dry laugh. Feels like she disagrees. Mark chuckled softly into the mic. Humor was oxygen in moments like this. She's a fighter, but so are you. And you've got more experience than she does. The exchange broke the tension for a moment, and even the younger controllers in. The tower exhaled, but Mark's focus never wavered. He knew what came next. Decision points. The Raptor couldn't stay in the sky forever. At some point, they would have to face the hardest part bringing her down. Ryan, Mark said, his voice serious again. I need you to listen carefully. We're going to prepare for descent, but only when you're ready. If the systems degrade further, you may have to eject. I won't sugarcoat it, but until that moment, I'm here. Every second, every correction, you're not alone. Ryan's reply came after a beat, low but strong. Copy that. Not bailing. Unless I have no choice. Mark nodded to himself. That was the fighter spirit, but also the weight of responsibility. Ryan wasn't just protecting himself, he was protecting those below. For several long minutes, they worked together. Mark guided him through small corrections, monitoring every fluctuation on the radar. Ryan followed, sweating, straining, but alive. It became almost like a dance ground and sky moving in sync. One voice and one set of hands fighting to keep the Raptor airborne. Mark's headset crackled again. Tower, Raptor 1. Controls still heavy. Hydraulics worsening. I don't know how long she'll keep listening. Mark closed his eyes briefly, his voice lowering to a near growl of determination. Then we make her listen. You've got more strength left in you than you think. Focus on the horizon, Ryan. Don't look at the chaos inside the cockpit. Look outside. Keep her straight. Ryan glanced up, past the flashing lights and warnings, past the blur of instruments. The horizon stretched endlessly, serene, indifferent to his struggle. Something about it steadied him. He adjusted his grip, muscles screaming, but his mind finding clarity. I see it, he said softly. Good, Mark replied. That's your anchor. Don't let it go. Time blurred. 10 minutes felt like an hour. The alarms became background noise, the strain in Ryan's arms a constant companion. But through it all, Mark's voice remained the one unbroken thread, firm, steady, relentless. At one point, Ryan muttered, half to himself, "This thing's going to rip me apart." Mark's reply was instant, almost fierce. "Not while I've got you, it won't. You hear me? You're walking away from this jet. One way or another, you're walking away." The conviction in his voice lit something inside Ryan, a spark of defiance that pushed back against the fatigue. He gritted his teeth, adjusted again, and felt the Raptor grudgingly comply. In the tower, Mark exhaled slowly, though his own pulse raced. He had no control stick, no throttle, no instruments beyond the radar screen. And yet, in this moment, he felt as though he were in that cockpit with Ryan, fighting every battle, sharing every strain. The younger controllers watched him in awe. To them, it was more than guidance. It was leadership under fire. As the clock ticked, Mark knew the hardest part still loomed. They couldn't stay aloft forever. The descent had to come, and with it the real test. But for now, as the sun burned higher over the horizon and the Raptor still held in the sky, Mark knew they had achieved something crucial. They had bought time. And sometimes, in the razor-thin margins between life and death, time was everything. The decision could no longer wait. Ryan's arms trembled with exhaustion, his gloves slick with sweat. For nearly half an hour, he had fought the jet into obedience, guided by Mark Harris's calm voice from the control tower. But the F-22 was a predator wounded beyond repair, bleeding systems one by one. Hydraulics lagged, fuel pressure warnings blared, and altitude continued to erode. The Raptor could not stay aloft forever. Raptor 1 Tower. Mark's voice filled the cockpit again, calm but edged with urgency. We need to start thinking about getting you down. You've bought yourself time, but systems are degrading. If you wait too long, you'll lose the option. Ryan swallowed, throat dry. His eyes flicked to the warning lights, red and amber blinking relentlessly, like predators circling. He had dreaded this moment, but he knew Mark was right. He couldn't fight forever. Copy, Tower, he said, voice flat with fatigue, but alive with resolve. Talk me through it. The tower fell silent for a heartbeat. Everyone in the room looked at Mark, knowing the weight now sat on his shoulders. Bringing down an F-22 was never routine, even in perfect conditions. With half its systems crippled, it was near impossible. But impossible wasn't an option. Mark's hand tightened around his pen. All right, Ryan, we're going to set you up for a long, shallow approach. No steep banks, no sudden drops. Smooth and steady, like you're coaxing her to sleep. Can you hold her level for another 5 minutes? Ryan exhaled slowly, adjusting the trembling stick. I can hold. Good. That's all we need right now. The approach Mark's eyes scanned the runway through the tower's glass. Crews on the ground were already scrambling, fire trucks lining the tarmac, medical teams on standby. Airfield was being cleared, all traffic rerouted. The entire base seemed to hold its breath. Raptor 1, turn heading 080, Mark instructed. We'll bring you around to runway 27. Keep your descent shallow 200 feet per minute max. Don't chase the numbers. Just keep her steady. Ryan's gloved hand nudged the stick. The jet shuddered, resisting, but complied. The horizon tilted, the runway beginning to align in the distance. His jaw clenched as he fought the sluggish response, every correction burning through what little strength remained in his arms. Turning, stabilizing, Ryan reported, his voice tight. Copy, Mark replied. You're doing great. Keep the nose level. Don't let her roll. Inside the tower, one of the younger controllers whispered, He's never going to make it. Mark shot him a glare sharp enough to cut steel. He will. The descent, at 3,000 feet, the jet lurched violently, the stick jerking in Ryan's hand. He swore under his breath, forcing it back under control. Sweat dripped into his eyes, stinging. Tower Raptor 1, major roll event. Corrected. But she's fighting harder. Mark's voice cut in instantly. Ease it, Ryan. Don't muscle it. Small corrections. Think fluid, not force. Ryan obeyed, coaxing the jet instead of yanking. The Raptor grudgingly leveled. His arms trembled with effort, but his mind locked onto Mark's words. He stole a glance at the horizon, steady, calm, indifferent. He clung to it like an anchor, just as Mark had told him earlier. 2,000 feet, Ryan reported, his voice strained. Speed holding at 180. Controls sluggish but responding. Copy, Mark said. His tone stayed calm, but sweat beaded on his own forehead in the tower. He wasn't in the cockpit, yet he felt every vibration, every warning, as if they were his own. Stay with me, Ryan. You're on profile. Keep her steady. The runway in sight. The dark strip of runway appeared ahead, stark against the sunlit landscape. For a moment, Ryan's chest tightened, not with fear, but with the raw ache of possibility. Survival was no longer a distant dream. It was there, visible, reachable. Tower, Raptor 1. Visual on runway 27. Mark's voice softened, almost paternal now. I've got you in sight, Ryan. You're lined up. Just keep her wings level, nice and steady. The ground rushed closer, every second heavier with risk. Hydraulics groaned, controls lagged, alarms blared. Ryan's muscles burned as he fought the stick, his entire body shaking with the effort to hold her straight. At 1,000 feet, another warning screamed across the cockpit, "Hid seas fail." The stick jerked violently, the jet rolling right. Ryan's heart stopped. He yanked left, muscles screaming, sweat flying. The Raptor tilted dangerously, the runway sliding out of view. Tower, Raptor 1, losing roll control. Mark's voice was immediate, commanding. Ease it, Ryan. Don't yank. Smooth left input, small, steady pressure. Trust her. Trust yourself. Ryan forced himself to obey, loosening his death grip, coaxing instead of fighting. The Raptor hesitated, groaned, then rolled back toward level flight. The runway returned to center. Correction achieved, Ryan gasped, chest heaving. Mark's voice came softer, steady as bedrock. That's it. That's flying, Ryan. You're still in control. Final approach 500 feet. The runway loomed large now, fire trucks gleaming red at its edges, crews braced for disaster. Every eye on the base was locked on the descending Raptor. Raptor 1, Tower, Mark said, his voice almost a whisper. This is it. Throttle back just a touch. Keep your descent shallow. Don't chase her, let her come to you. Ryan eased the throttle, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. The jet responded sluggishly, nose dipping slightly. He corrected, guiding it back. 400 feet, Ryan muttered. You've got this, Mark replied. Keep her steady. Eyes on the horizon. 300 feet. The stick fought him again, heavy, unresponsive. He coaxed it, sweat dripping, arms burning. 200 feet. The runway blurred, rushing closer. 100 feet, Ryan reported, voice shaking. Controls sluggish, still correcting. Mark's voice came calm, almost serene. You're right there. Just keep her level. Let the ground rise to you. Don't force it. Ryan's entire body ached, vision narrowing, but he held. The Raptor floated, nose steady, wings trembling that level. 50 feet. 30. 20. The wheels screeched as they kissed the runway. The jet lurched, bouncing once, then slammed down harder, skidding across the tarmac. Ryan fought the stick, brakes sluggish, the Raptor screaming in protest. Fire trucks roared alongside, ready to douse flames. The jet veered, tires squealing, smoke billowing. Ryan wrestled it, coaxing, pleading. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Raptor slowed, groaning to a shuddering halt halfway down the runway. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of the radio. Tower, Raptor 1, Ryan panted, voice ragged. On the ground, engines cut. I'm still here. The tower erupted in cheers, controllers shouting in relief, some clapping, others collapsing into their chairs. But Mark stayed silent for a moment, eyes closed, chest heavy. Then he pressed the mic, his voice soft but full of pride. You did it, Ryan. You brought her home. Aftermath, ground crews swarmed the Raptor, foam trucks spraying precautionary. Streams. The canopy opened, and Ryan was helped out, his legs shaking, his face pale but alive. Applause erupted from the crews, their relief palpable. From the tower, Mark watched quietly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He wasn't the one in the cockpit, but he had been there all the same. His voice had carried Ryan through chaos, through fear, through the impossible. And now, the jet sat battered but whole on the runway, a testament not just to one pilot's determination, but to the lifeline of a voice from the ground. The roar of the engines faded, leaving only the hiss of cooling metal and the hum of emergency vehicles. The F-22 Raptor sat wounded on the runway, its sleek frame scarred by smoke and stress, but intact. Crews swarmed around it, spraying foam, securing systems, and checking for leaks. For a moment, the runway looked like a battlefield after victory smoke, sweat, and relief mingling in the air. Ryan sat slumped in the cockpit, hands trembling on the stick even after the engines shut down. His gloves were soaked with sweat, his muscles twitching with exhaustion. For the first time in nearly an hour, silence filled his headset. No alarms, no instructions, just the sound of his own ragged breathing. Then a voice crackled through one last time, soft and steady. "You're on the ground, Ryan. It's over. You made it." It was Mark. Ryan closed his eyes, the weight of the words sinking in. He wanted to speak, but his throat closed, his emotions locked behind fatigue and disbelief. All he could manage was a whispered, "Copy, tower." The walk across the runway, the canopy lifted with a hiss, and sunlight poured into the cockpit. A maintenance officer climbed the ladder, reaching for Ryan. "Captain, can you move?" Ryan nodded stiffly. His legs trembled as he climbed out, every step down the ladder a reminder of the fight he had just survived. When his boots touched the tarmac, a wave of applause erupted from the gathered crew. Firefighters, medics, mechanics, and even bystanders clapped, some whistling, some wiping tears from their eyes. Ryan, still dazed, managed a weak smile and a nod. He wasn't a man who sought attention, but the raw humanity of that applause struck him deeply. He hadn't just saved himself. He had saved everyone who might have been in the path of a crashing fighter. Medics rushed forward, checking his vitals, offering water, guiding him toward a waiting vehicle. But Ryan paused, turning his gaze upward. His eyes searched the distant control tower, the glass walls glinting in the sun. He knew exactly where he needed to go. In the tower, Mark Harris removed his headset slowly, setting it on the console with care. His shoulders sagged, the adrenaline. That had kept him steady, draining all at once. Around him, the tower buzzed with celebration. Controllers congratulated one another, some patting Mark on the back, others simply staring in awe. But Mark didn't smile, not yet. His eyes stayed fixed on the runway, watching the tiny figure of Ryan being helped away from the jet. Relief washed over him, but it came with the heavy aftertaste of responsibility. He had been the voice guiding Ryan through the storm, and the knowledge of how close they had come to tragedy lingered like a shadow. One of the younger controllers, eyes wide, broke the silence. "Sir, I've never seen anything like that. You saved his life." Mark shook his head. "No, he saved his life. I just reminded him he wasn't alone." The meeting. An hour later, after debriefs and medical checks, Ryan walked into the tower. He looked pale, his flight suit streaked with salt stains from sweat, but his steps were steady. The room quieted instantly. Every controller turned to watch as he scanned the room, eyes locking on Mark. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the man who had fought in the sky and the man who had anchored him from the ground. No words were needed to recognize the bond forged between them. Then Ryan stepped forward, his voice hoarse but firm. "Mark, I owe you my life." Mark shook his head, standing to meet him. "You don't owe me a thing. You did the flying. You made the choices. I was just the voice in your ear. Ryan's eyes softened, emotion breaking through the stoic facade of a fighter pilot. Maybe, but without that voice, I would have pulled the handles. I was right there, Mark. One more second of silence, and I'd have been out of that jet. Mark's throat tightened. He placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder, his voice low. Then I'm glad I wasn't silent. Reflection later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ryan sat alone near the flight line, staring at the battered Raptor. Mechanics worked around it, cataloging damage, preparing for the long process of repair. To most, it was just a machine. To Ryan, it was both a nemesis and a partner one that had tested him to his core. He replayed the moments in his mind, the alarms, the trembling stick, the flashes of doubt. But what stood out most wasn't the struggle, it was the voice. Calm, steady, unwavering. A lifeline through chaos. For years, he had trained to trust. His instruments, his instincts, his wingman. But that day, what saved him wasn't technology or training alone. It was the connection between two people, one in the sky, one on the ground, fighting the same battle together. Mark, meanwhile, sat in his quiet office in the tower. He wrote his report meticulously, recording every detail, every communication. But between the lines of technical jargon, his thoughts drifted. He wasn't a man prone to sentiment, but he couldn't shake the image of Ryan's voice cracking under strain, the weight of his silence between words. He realized something important. Technology could fail, systems could falter, but the human element, the bond, the trust, the steady voice was irreplaceable. The debrief, the official debrief the next day, was clinical. Engineers dissected the failure, pointing to a cascading system's malfunction, fuel pressure, triggering hydraulic instability, compounded by software miscommunication. Charts and graphs filled the room, explanations layered in technical language. Ryan listened, nodding, but his thoughts were elsewhere. When asked how he kept control, his answer was simple. I wasn't alone. The tower was with me. The room fell silent. Even the engineers, buried in their data, felt the weight of all those words. Mark, sitting quietly in the back, lowered his gaze. He hadn't spoken of his role publicly. To him, it wasn't about recognition. It was about responsibility, about doing his duty. But hearing Ryan give voice to it filled him with a quiet pride he would never admit aloud. Legacy of the moment. In the days that followed, the story spread across the base, then beyond. Pilots spoke of it in hushed tones. Controllers cited it as proof of the power of teamwork. It became more than just an incident. It became a story, a reminder. 10 minutes before an F-22 was destined to crash, a pilot had been saved. Not by an instrument, not by luck, but by the steady, unshakable guidance of a voice from the control tower. Ryan carried the lesson with him into every flight afterward. He knew the sky could turn hostile in seconds, but he also knew he'd never truly be alone. There was always someone on the ground, watching, guiding, ready to step in when silence threatened. Mark, for his part, returned to his console, headset back on, calm as ever. To new controllers, he became a quiet legend, the man whose voice had pulled a pilot back from the brink. But when asked about it, he always said the same thing. The pilot saved himself. I just reminded him he could. Closing reflection. On quiet nights, Ryan sometimes dreamed of that moment, the alarm screaming, the stick trembling, the ground rushing closer. But in those dreams, one sound always broke through, clear and steady. A voice, calm in the storm. A voice that had saved him. And he knew, deep down, that long after the memory of the malfunction faded, long after the Raptor was repaired or retired, he would remember that voice. Not just as a lifeline, but as a reminder of the unbreakable bond between those who fly and those who guide.